Drona, I'll magically remove that. No, I'm giving you the vision of a higher purpose that you can fulfill. And with that vision, you can fight. So when we study history, this is one of the most important things which we can learn among many. That life in this world has never been easy. Yes, in today's world, there are a particular set of challenges which may not have been there in the past. But there's another set of challenges in the past. And when the Acharyas, they were great transcendentalists who are unaffected by the world. But the Acharyas, they were both transcendentalists in that their connection with Krishna personally was not affected by any of the circumstances. But each of the Acharyas were what also can be called as pragmatists. Pragmatists means that they were very pragmatic. They had practical wisdom how to deal with the challenges of their particular times. So like I mentioned now, that uh, Akbar was more or less a congenial ruler. Not fully congenial, but more or less congenial. And after him, Shah Jahan was okay, but Aurangzeb was, to the extent he was devoted to his own religion, to that extent he was uh, intolerant of other religions. And anything that reeked of any challenge to the supremacy of his religion and directly of him, he wanted to destroy it. So Vrindavan experienced an extremely great difficulty at that time. And the Bengal had its own challenges, and we'll focus on Bengal when we talk about Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktivedanta Thakur also. Bengal was the place where the Indian independence struggle began, and we will see how the interface between those two things happened, the independence struggle and the Krishna consciousness movement and all that. But here, let's focus on Vrindavan. So when we focus on Vrindavan, what happened was that there were multiple kinds of challenges. But interestingly enough, challenges that were faced were different at different times. So when Aurangzeb devastated Vrindavan, among many other places of sacred significance for the followers of Sanatana Dharma, had a terrible impact. And while unfortunately, whatever is, he lived for a very long time, and he eventually, the period of the greatest tyranny was also the phase of the fall of the Mughal Empire. In his persecuting various leaders of Sanatana Dharma, he destroyed his own kingdom basically. He destroyed many other kingdoms, but he destroyed his own kingdom also. So after Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire more or less became just a shadow of its former self. So later on, in 1857, when the Indian mutiny, what they call it, the first battle of independence or whatever you want to call it, that happened. At that time, the Mughal king was just a figurehead. Although he was appointed by even the Indian independence leaders as the leader, but he was just a figurehead. So Aurangzeb did the consequences of his desecration of the Vedic tradition was that eventually he was the person who led the downfall of his own kingdom. And so that was unavoidable as a matter of time would happen. But let's see. So Vishwanath Chandra Thakur and Baldev Vidyabhushan. So Chakravarti Pad was also from Bengal. And from Bengal, he came to Vrindavan. Now, Bengal and Vrindavan were far away, and going on that journey was a very difficult journey. It was not easy. And that's why when Madhavendra Puri was told to go and get Chandan, for him to go from Vrindavan all the way to Utkal to get Chandan, so all the way to Orissa, that was not an easy task. So still, between Bengal and Vrindavan, there was some exchange going on. And as a part of that exchange, many things happened. So the news of all the devastation that had happened in Vrindavan That was very much there. So from Vrindavan, many of the sacred deities of the Goswamis were moved to Jaipur and various other places. And there was safety. Now, Aurangzeb, he had some kind of mutual agreement detant with the detant means you live and let live kind of arrangement with the Rajput. The Rajputs were also heroic, powerful, and some of them they agreed to pay tribute to Aurangzeb, and that's how they stayed on over there. So they had some kind of mutual agreement of peace. So in fact, when initially Shivaji Maharaj was arrested, Shivaji Maharaj is a very powerful protector of Kshatriya of the Sanatan Dharma in Maharashtra. He was arrested. He was Aurangzeb sent two of his Muslim generals, and they could not succeed. Hmm. Shaiste Khan, Afzal Khan, they didn't succeed, but eventually he sent a Rajput king. And that Rajput king eventually, Shivaji Maharaj he let himself be arrested instead of having a fight, and he came and he was planning to be killed, but he escaped from there. So the point I was making is the Rajputs had a complicated relationship with Aurangzeb. Sometimes they fought against him, sometimes they worked for him, and they had their own internal politics also. But the center of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, or at least a very significant influence of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, place of influence, became the Jaipur court. Jaipur was always a politically influential place, historically influential place, but for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because Aurangzeb was such a tyrannical person, gradually the focus shifted from Vrindavan to Jaipur. Vrindavan was undoubtedly a holy place, and Vishwanath Thakur came there. And while we know Vishwanath Thakur as a Rasik Acharya, he's called. He is considered the person who revealed the rasa in all the texts. He revealed even the Gita, how there is so much sweetness. He revealed that. And of course, the Bhagavatam himself says that just like there's a churning of the milk ocean to bring out the nectar, similarly, he sees the commentators are like the churners and they bring out the nectar of the Bhagavatam. So if we look at him, I said earlier about Acharya, a transcendentalist and pragmatist, both are there. So he was very grounded. He saw Vrindavan in ruins and he slowly set about re-establishing it. He was a great saint. And he didn't have political influence, but by saintly purity, he attracted people. And slowly the temple started being rebuilt and Vrindavan started being rejuvenated. Now, while this was happening, it's remarkable that in his books, there is not even the least mention of the Islamic invaders and how terrible they are and how terribly they have acted. No mention. It's almost as if when he's writing books, he's existing on a different domain of existence. And he could very easily have weaponized the Gita. Weaponizing the Gita means sometimes scriptures are weaponized. Weaponizing of scripture is a very common phenomena across religious traditions. So some statements of scripture can be used to inspire those who believe in the scriptures to attack somebody who we consider as the enemy. So this is used by religious extremists in Islam. Has been used by religious extremists in Judaism, in Christianity also. This weaponizing of scripture does happen. But Chakravarti Path does not do that. Nowhere in his Gita commentary does he say, just as Krishna to attack these adharmic Kauravas, told Arjuna to fight against the adharmic Kauravas. So all these Islamic invaders are adharmic and we should all rise and fight against them. There's no mention at all over there. Then we wonder why. There is no weaponizing of scripture at all. So was he not concerned about the situation? Of course he was concerned. He was working to restore the damage that had been done over there. But there was a particular context in which he was operating. See, in the past, before the Industrial Revolution, before the development of technology in terms of the printing press, Books were primarily for the scholars. Hmm. And so the written books comprise the written tradition. The written tradition was primarily for the scholars. So books were written by scholars for scholars. Books were very difficult to possess, to write a book was very difficult. You had to get leaves that would be preserved, and with pen particular write it down, and every single word has to be written down carefully. And then before whatever leaves, palm leaves or whatever we have written it on, before it gets destroyed or deteriorated or damaged by time, it has to be transferred, and everything has to be done manually and meticulously. So it was very difficult to have books. So books were rare, and they were written by scholars for scholars. For the masses, for the people in general, there was the oral tradition. The oral tradition was where there was the most of the practical lived applied wisdom was given. So in the books, there's no need to emphasize practical things like, say, we should chant the holy names of the Lord and mention of that. But that was told in the oral tradition. Scholars, when they're writing for scholars, they don't have to tell these practical things. Now, it is Srila Prabhupada who was quite distinctive. They started from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but social commentary, practical instructions, all of that to be given within scripture explanation. That was something which is normally not done in the tradition. Chakravarti Pad, while he saw all the devastation, he was not going to let that bitterness come within him. He's not going to let that affect the way he was writing scriptures. So in many ways, it's a if we look at the acharyas within history at the time they're remarkable figures. There's one way to be inspired by them when we see how ecstatically they're absorbed in Krishna. But there's a quite another quality of inspiration that comes when we see that they were ecstatically absorbed in Krishna while functioning in such difficult situations. So when we see the ruins of the temples that he grew up hearing about, the Goswamis had become iconic characters within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And everybody would want to hear about the glory of the Goswamis, the glory of the temples that they had built. That's what he had grown up hearing. And then he was caused immense pain to hear these temples had been devastated. He came and he saw the ruins and he had to repair it. He had to fix it all and he did it all. At the same time, there was a challenge. So it was a huge challenge, but he did not let himself get affected by it. So for all of us in our lives, there are things that give strength and there are things that need strength. So it could be like people. Some people, it's a joy to be with them. But by being with them, we feel enlivened, we feel thrilled, we look forward to being with them more and more. But there are some people, such a burden to be with them. But then maybe it's a service to guide them, to support them, to work with them. So when we have to do that, we need to be careful that we don't let that negative energy, that exhaustion completely sap us. So he was writing a scriptural commentary, and at that time, there were not many Gaudiya Vaishnava followers available. So there were, of course, but there were not many. He's writing his books. Why? Sometimes when we give a class, we think there's who's the audience over there. He was writing these books because that was his dharma. He was going to glorify the Lord. And he wrote it. And yes, in future, people may read it. Same with the Goswamis also. The dharmasya glani keeps happening. Dharmasya glani keeps happening. And then there is restoration. Again glani, again restoration. So he managed this. And his books, they gave his contributions both in terms of what he did practically in Vrindavan as well as his books that gave new life to the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition once again. Now, by this time, many things had happened in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. We will talk about various aspects of the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition as we move onwards. But basically, how does the tradition continue? Like I mentioned, there are in a tradition, there are the leaders. The leaders could be most important, the saints. And then there are the priests, and then there are the scholars. Now we could say there are also the preachers, the teachers. And these categories could be overlapping. Traditionally, in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there was no organization. Organization came at the time of Bhaktivedanta Thakur itself. So, in that sense, one prominent genre which we have today, managers, that was not there at that time. In today's world, in a spiritual movement, the managers sometimes become the most important leaders. And sometimes one person may have to play more than one of these roles. But there were the leaders, and then there are the followers. So now followers may also become one of these, and followers may also. But the idea is that for a period of time, what is remembered the most is those who, by their saintliness, by their purity, by their devotion, they share it with many, many people. So in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there were, if we consider, there are primarily two kinds of leaders were there. There are the priests, and then there were the saints. Others were also there. The scholars were there, and others were there. But these are the so the when there's the time of initiation came, diksha came. Diksha is a very multifaceted subject. Mm. And there have been many different kinds of gurus. There are like family elders who were gurus at times. There were the local priests who became gurus. There were traveling saints who became gurus. So Advaita Acharya, he took initiation from Madhavendra Puri. So that there's no meeting him. He came and he went. He took initiation. But most people would take initiation more or less from the local priests in their particular village or town. And those priests would come to name their children, would be there to officiate their marriages. And that there were these people who were carrying on the tradition. And in the past, the temple was the center of the entire community. It was like if you go to if you go to Jaipur, the temple of the Lord is taller than even the palace of the king. The temple was the center of the community. And Chakravarti Pal was doing his rejuvenation work in Vrindavan. And then the center at that time, in one sense, one center was Jaipur. Now, as the Gaudiya Vaishnava, as the Radha Govindji deities, the prominent deities from Vrindavan were moved to Jaipur. So the Govindji deities won the hearts of the kings. The kings, they, while they would have their uh, devotion, their spirituality, they would learn it from their family. The parents would be worshipping someone, and then their children would start worshipping. The subsequent king would worship. It would be like that. But quite often there were changes. And most often these changes did not lead to any kind of polarization or violence. That means that sometimes a king might be a Vaishnavite. Like if you look at Krishna Dev Rai, who was in South India, he built what is called a Vijayanagar, which is called the forgotten or the lost city. Many times it was extraordinary uh, testament to Vedic resilience. He stood firm against all the invaders from various sides, and he built an immensely prosperous kingdom. Now, in his succession of kings, some of them, one of uh, Krishnadeva Rai himself was a Vaishnava. Later on, one of the subsequent kings, he went from a Sri Vaishnava to a Madhva Vaishnava, from Madhva Vaishnava to Sri Vaishnava. The Advaitins were also respected. So there were, while the kings would be devoted to one particular deity, maybe one particular guru, but the kings would respect saints of various denominations. They would respect the various traditions that were there. However, which tradition would get the maximum influence? Sometimes there would be some political tussle even among the religious groups at that. So traditionally in Jaipur, there were the Ramanandis. Now, the Ramanandis have a complex history. They are in some ways followers of Ramanuja, the Ramanujacharya. They he traveled all over the country and he lived a remarkably long time. Yeah, he lived more than 100 years, and he did extraordinary contribution for rejuvenating bhakti across the country. So Ramanandis are followers of Ramanuja. Of course, every tradition with time gets certain conceptions which may or may not be in alignment with the original teachings. So there is some issue with the Ramanandis that sometimes they consider their primary saint to be like the reincarnation of Ram. And there were some issues with that, but the Ramanandis were the primary priests. And because the Jaipur kings they would worship in the temple that they used to worship, that was their temple. And when Govindji came, at that time, Govindji won the heart of the his beauty, his extraordinary charm that won the heart of the king. And then the king started worshipping Govindji. And the royal patronage, while it was going to all the kings, the royal support, it started going more to Govindji. And some power by spiritual purity. Mhm. So if somebody is a great saint and they have such purity, they attract people, they attract followers. But if spiritual, it's not possible with spiritual purity. Then there are material means. Material means could be intellectual. You try to prove how the other people are wrong. It could be political. It could be we try to get more followers and we try to establish how we are more influential. You have to listen to us. And these methods have to be used. So what the Ramanandis did was that they launched an intellectual attack on the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And they started questioning many things. But one of the things they started questioning was the very authenticity of the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Now, they also started questioning the worship of Radharani. So their question was that, yes, Krishna is worshipped with Rukmani. If you see, Rajasthan is not very far from Gujarat. And Gujarat primarily it is Rukmani Dwarkadhik that is worshipped. And generally, Krishna, especially in the eastern part of the world, was generally worshipped at those times with Rukmani. So they said, what is the basis for this worship of Radharani? Now, uh, there is a complex history behind this, but we can say Vrindavan, Radha Krishna have been worshipped. Well, yes, um, it depends. Krishna has always been worshipped, and along with Krishna, like if you look at the Goswami's histories also, the Krishna deity appeared first, and then gradually later the Radha deity would appear in different places. So it is not that Radha Krishna worship was always going on together. Many temples were just Krishna temples. Now most of the temples, now practically we have very few Krishna temples around. There is always Krishna with Radharani. So that has become almost standard now. But this was not always the standard. And what Baldev Vidyabhushan did, what the Gaudiya is Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Who are these Sampradaya? And they said, what is the authority? There are four Sampradayas mentioned. And Padma Purana mentions the four Sampradayas, the Puranas mention them. So, which is Gaudiya Vaishnava? There's not mentioned any of them. So they started questioning. And then we didn't have uh, many of the things which would mark somebody as a Sampradaya. And this is where Baldev Vidyabhushan's huge role comes in. Prabhupada dedicates his Gita commentary to Baldev Vidyabhushan. And It's because Baldev Devachan played such a vital role in preserving and protecting our tradition. Not only protecting, but establishing the authority and the authenticity of our tradition. If in today's world, we want to go for a talk, I don't know, okay, the credibility can be established. You want to go for a talk, the credibility can be from the, and most importantly, in that those times was the Vedanta Sutra. So, depending on how a particular tradition wrote commentaries on this, and how solid, how sound those commentaries were. Sound means, okay, do you, when you're writing a commentary, do you actually know the book? Are you explaining the book in a rational way? Are you quoting Shastra? Are you explaining the way that makes the sense of the whole book? So these commentaries would determine the authority of the tradition. The Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, so it was like a catch-22 situation for our tradition at that. The catch-22 is, this way you go, you fall into a trap. This way you go, you fall into a trap. So what was that? Now, there was a claim that we are affiliated with the Madhva tradition. And then if we focus on the point that we are affiliated with Madhva tradition, and that's the basis of authority, and the Ramanandis are saying, but the Madhvas don't worship Radha. So therefore, your worship of Radha Krishna, Radha Govinda is questionable. And he said, oh yeah, we are followers of Madhva, but we are also followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave us the worship of Radharani in this special mood. And then the question, okay, then if you have overrun thing, then you have become like a different sampradaya, or at least a different group within a sampradaya. Something as what is your authenticity? So it was, the dilemma was that if we try to gain credibility, the dilemma was of how do we gain credibility? That how, when we are criticized, how do we gain credibility? We can gain credibility by affiliation with Madhva Sampradaya. But if we do that, the problem was no Radha worship. Because that's not there over there. On the other hand, if we focus on our affiliation with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or affiliation, or more like the the special origin from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then the problem is that, okay, if his teachings are being emphasized so much, what are his teachings? Then the problem is no commentary. You don't have any commentaries. And therefore, our whole Sampraday's credibility was being questioned. Now, how was this credibility going to be established? So, it's like, say, suppose somebody claims this, the idea of a soul is scientific. But then there's no mention of this in any scientific journals. There is, but I'm just giving a hypothetical situation. Then you cannot accept the idea of the soul if you say that you are scientific. But then, okay, but we have our own scientists, we have done our own research. But then it is not published in these journals, any of them. So how can you say it's authoritative? Oh, but we have our own scientific institute, we have published these books, and evaluate these books. See how credible our arguments are. But if we say, okay, this is not published in mainstream journals, we accept the idea of the soul, but we don't have our own books explaining the idea of the soul in a scientific way, you would really lose credibility. So Prabhupada started the Bhaktivedanta Institute because he wanted that people should see that our wisdom, our tradition's wisdom also makes scientific sense, not just scriptural sense. So when this credibility dilemma was there, this is where enter Baldev Vidyabhushan. It's like when there is a big crisis, a hero comes in a movie. And that hero then saves the situation. Now, Baldev Vidyabhushan has a remarkable history. Baldev Vidyabhushan himself was a part of the Madhva Sampradaya. Now, our Sampradaya is a Sampradaya more or less of Shiksha rather than Diksha. So he was a part of the Madhva Sampradaya, and he became extremely learned in the teaching of the Madhva Sampradaya. And then he was traveling and he was teaching and he was learning and visiting the holy places. That's when he encountered the Gaudiya Vaishnavism Sampradaya. And when he encountered the Gaudiya Vaishnavism Sampradaya, he felt that there is darkness to this, the depth of devotion over here. He didn't look anywhere else. And his heart captured. Then he was already a great, he was a, some others tradition, he was a scholar, and then he became a devotee scholar. When he became a devotee scholar at this particular time, he came to Vrindavan. And in Vrindavan, he met Vishwanath Thakur. Now, he was initiated by someone else, but Vishwanath Thakur became like his Siksha Guru, became primarily inspired by him. And when this crisis came in Jaipur, at this time, Chakravarti Pad had become quite elderly. The Vaishnavas who were there in Jaipur, they were learned in their own way. They were also very devoted, but they were just not equal to this challenge. How do we defend our tradition? What do we do for defending this our tradition? So they came rushing to Chakravarti Pad, they came rushing to Vrindavan. And Chakravarti Pad said that, you know, and then he suggested, recommended, instructed Baldev Vidyabhushan go. And that's when Baldev Vidyabhushan came to Jaipur. And there in Jaipur, he had to confront this challenge. And he gave very sound scripture based arguments to defend the worship of Radharani, to talk about, to establish the special position of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and how the teachings of Mahaprabhu